Hey guys, this is Robert with RC1 Hobbies, and this is going to be my video on soldering Traxxas battery connectors. I am not a professional solderer. This is all just picked up as I gained experience over 10 years of soldering. So these are some of the tools I'm going to have on hand, readily available to use if I need them. Regular wire cutters, wire strippers, needle nose pliers, and some cutters for fine cutting. Solder flux, the jigs up, alligator clips, soldering block, my ceramic pad, soldering iron. This soldering iron is nice. It has a sponge wet, and you can use to wipe your tip clean after using it. It's good to keep old solder off or overheated solder off your tip. And so we're gonna do that now. I have some battery tabs that are been soldered before, and I have some that have not. Also, I have an old plug that was cut off, and I'm going to show you how to reuse this plug. It's old and dirty, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's just been cut off, and I have some dummy wires over here we're going to use to solder to our new battery tabs. Also, I use a hobby knife for getting solder flux. So these tabs are female battery tabs. They are lettered. The male set is A and the female set is B. You can see the letter B right there. And you see the line that is in the tab. That's where you don't want your solder to go past. You don't want it to go that way. You want it to stop at the very end there and stay. Because if you go past that, it'll make it difficult to get the tabs back or into the battery connector. Do two methods, and I always use a little bit of flux for the tab because it's new, and I like to prime it. It actually works better when you prime it. And you don't need much here. I'm scraping off any excess, and then I'm going to add some to this one. Alright, so those are ready to be heated up, and once you heat that flux, it goes right in. Let's try this guy. Alright, so I have my soldering iron on, and it's ready to go. So let's prepare our wires. So we're going to take our wire strippers and strip the wire. So we're gauging the thickness of the wire, so when we come down, we don't cut the wires themselves. We only cut the insulation around that wire. So we want to start big. If we're unsure, start big, go all the way down, and you can even turn it a 90-degree angle, and it worked great. It just took the insulation off and left the wire, which is good. That's what we want. And if we feel we don't have enough off, which this is probably good enough, but we can do a little bit more. Do the same thing, but just very slightly. Take that off. And we don't need a lot of wire exposed. We just want about 1/8 of an inch. Now we want to tin this. I use alligator clips. And I put it in the alligator clip, and I tilt it upward a little bit, and we're going to try it without flux and see how well it works, and try it with flux next time to see if it works any better. So I'm getting my solder ready, so I pull out enough solder. I get my soldering iron, I wipe it off to make it clean. And then I'm going to add solder to the soldering iron and get a good blob on there. And then I'm going to touch it to the wire give it a chance to heat up, and let's see what happens. And this has been my experience. Without the flux, it doesn't go in very well. See that? So that's my experience. So I'm going to add the flux to the wire. So we get our flux out. We get a little dab. Oh, and it's still hot. I don't know if you saw that. I touched the flux right there and it melted and went right in. So now let's add the solder and see what happens. So I'm going to wipe off my soldering tip. We're going to tin the tip of our soldering iron again, being generous. Let's see what happens this time. Where'd that solder go? It went on the other side. Look at that. And now you can see it goes right in to the wire. You can see the little bubbling there of the flux drying, evaporating. And look, it just sucked right into the wire. Perfect. That's why I use flux. I'm not a professional solderer. I just pick up things as I go. And so I use flux. So our wire is soldered very nicely, actually. So now we can bring in our battery tab. I take the battery tab, put it on an alligator clip, then I take the wire and just set it right there. So all I got to do is touch it, press it with the soldering iron, and it should do really well. And I'll tilt the alligator clip a little bit to apply a little bit of pressure so it doesn't move away once I heat it up, because once you heat it up you can't touch it. You can't touch this, it'll be hot. So now I'm going to add just a touch of solder here just to help in the heating process, because the liquid's so hot it absolutely molds around shapes to the wire size or the wire shape, and we're going to press on it until we get everything to liquefy. And once the liquid spreads out on the battery tab, that's it. There we go. And then we hold it, let it cool, and that should be it. Very nice. The solder's behind the line. It's a good solid bead of solder. Very nice soldering job. So if you're doing a battery, you want to plug this in as soon as you're done with it, as long as it's not too hot to touch. So you see the plus sign on the Traxxas connector. You look at the other side, there's no signs. It just says TRX for Traxxas. So we turn it over, we see the plus sign. And it's got a slot to slide this in. And we push it in until it won't go anymore. And it needs to snap in. So when it doesn't snap in, you still have a little battery tab sticking out. So you can take a firm object. I prefer to use a hex head wrench because it has a handle and it's got a flat surface on top, and I put it right on the metal tab, not on the wire, but on the metal tab, and listen for you'll hear the thump when it goes into place. That was it. So then you turn it over and see that the tab is really close to the end of the plug, so you know it's in there good. And you want it to snap in, because when you go to plug the battery into your ESC, and it's going to apply pressure here, and if it's not snapped in, it'll push the wire out of the plug and you will not have a connection. So you want to make sure it snaps into place and goes all the way almost to the very end of the plug. So this is a good solder job, and it's installed. So we're going to go to our next wire. we're going to use the same process, but we're going to do just a little, add a step to it. For those who want to use this step, they can. Alright, we got the wire ready. We're going to use our jigs up alligator clip. Put it in there. We're going to get our little bit of flux. Add a little bit of flux there, being careful not to bend any wires. Like I see one bent right there. It's not really bad, but if you push too hard, you'll get a bunch of them out, and you want them to be all parallel, laying with each other flat. So now I'm going to get my solder ready. Clean off my soldering iron. And here we're going to add the solder to the tip. We're going to tin the tip, and that helps the liquid touch all the as many wires as possible to heat it up as quickly as possible. So now we're going to add solder so we get a good blurb on the wire. And don't get too much, because then it'll ruin the process of soldering the battery tab. And you get too much solder on the battery tab, then it goes past the little line. So that'll cool a little bit. And we'll bring in our other battery tab that I have already put the flux on, and we're going to tin that just for the sake of doing a different method. And we do that similar to, and I'm going to tilt it down a little bit so the solder doesn't go over the line. And we're going to do just a very little bit of solder here, and just enough to bleed on the battery tab to prime it. See that bleeding over there? Perfect. Now that battery tab is tinned, so it's actually ready for the wire. So let's get the wire ready. So I'm adjusting the distance onto the battery tab. We want to get these lined up so when it's hot we don't have to do any adjustment. Clean off our soldering iron. Now we're going to just add a little bit of solder here to the iron again to make the hot solder heat up the wire quickly. Otherwise we will be waiting here a while. So I'm going to try this at a side angle. See if we can get that to be a better view. Look at that. Nice. No solder past the wire, the line. We're going to put our soldering iron, wipe it off, and put it back in its holster. Then this is cooling. We're going to get our battery connector ready to install the plug. We'll release the plug. Remember, this is still hot. It takes a little bit to cool it. So now we can put the negative in the negative slot. So we got it in. Now we're going to use our hex tool to push it all the way in until it makes the pop sound, and you can feel it too. There it is. It's in. So we just soldered a Traxxas connector onto our two wires, and because sometimes you buy batteries and they don't have connectors, so this is a good thing to have to learn how to put your Traxxas connector on your wires. So we can try this again with our male connector. Okay, we have a male connector here. This usually goes to your ESC on your RC model. So we're gonna take these wires off because they're looking kind of frayed and not healthy. I've been wanting to do this for a while. So I'm going to take these off and redo them with a better connection. So I'm just simply going to cut the wires. And this is a bullet connector for my battery charger. So this is the wire that goes to my battery charger. Plugs in the side. So I want to redo these. This is how I charge my batteries. You have to have a male connector to charge, to attach your battery, which is female, to the charger. So we're gonna take these tabs out. I'll show you how to do that. That's what the jig is really good for. Because of the holes, you can line up the tab over the hole so it can come out, because it needs to come out. So if you lay that flat, it's not going to move very much. It may move some because of the wires, but because of the wires in the way, it won't move a whole lot. So I put this over a hole, and then I literally do the same thing with my wrench, my hex driver. I put it right on that edge. Make sure it's over the hole. Give it a little push. Comes out. So the male connectors and the female connectors are different, so you cannot use them on the other connector. So they are sensitive. So I'm going to show you the letter. You can see it there. See the A right there by the solder line? So that's for males, and the B is for females. So we're going to take both of these out. We got to take out the second one. There it is. Alright, so that's done. So now we want to get rid of this wire. The solder's not so bad. I mean, it's okay. We can actually reuse that solder. So we want to get rid of the wire. So how I do it is put it in my alligator clip. And then I get my needle nose pliers so I can grab that wire when it's hot. I can take out this other alligator clip to give me a little more room. So we get our soldering iron. We can add a little bit of solder to this to help it heat up fast. Get our needle nose pliers on the end of the wire. Apply the heat. Come right off. Now if you didn't have the solder on the soldering iron, it probably wouldn't come off that fast. And remember, the part you pulled off is hot. So we want to put that on something to let it cool. So now we want to prepare the wire. So we're gonna go start with the red wire, get our wire strippers. Now this wire is a different diameter than the other wire. So we can go quite a bit smaller. And we look at the insulation related to the wire. And remember, we want to go big and move ourselves down. That looks right to me. There it is. So this one is cleaned off. So now we want to tin this wire. So I put my alligator clip back on so I can tin this wire. So I get the flux, a little bit of flux. As you can see, the flux will last you a lifetime if you just use a little bit at a time, because you're not doing a tons of soldering. I'm just doing some battery connectors once in a while. And ESC plugs. And I do that with all my airplanes and all my trucks. I use the Traxxas connector just so it's easy to, when it comes time to charge. Alright, so we're ready to add solder to this wire. And now we can be a little bit generous with this. It heats up the flux and the solder just goes right to the wire. That's so nice when you use flux. So that's ready to go to the battery connector, so we can line up. Remember, it's hot, so we can line that up with our connector. So that's ready to go. So let's try it without the solder on it and see how quickly we can get it to go, because it's just thin wire. It might go really fast. Oh yeah. Let's see how well that worked. Looks good. So because this is a battery charger connector, we don't have to put it in the plug right now, because there's no risk of arcing or sparks. So let's get the next tab ready by removing the wire that's already connected. Get our needle nose pliers. We're going to do it without the solder, and you can see how long it takes by not putting solder on your iron. It doesn't heat it up very fast at all. It takes a little longer. So that's why I do that, to get the solder hot fast by adding hot solder. Makes sense, right? To make the solder heat up faster, we want to touch more of the solder. Well, we're only touching a small tip right here relatively to the surface area of the solder. So when we put solder on the tip, it melts that solder, makes it hot, and then the hot solder touches more surface area of the cold solder, and it makes it liquefied quicker. So that's why we do it. So now I want to prepare my wire by stripping it. Again, now we're going to tin it. We're going to get some flux. So for the sake of viewing, we're going to move that battery tab so it's out of the way. A little bit of flux there. Get some solder ready. Tin the iron. And you can see once you get your method down, it can go pretty quick. You won't spend a lot of time doing this, even though I like it. So we're going to line up these guys. Here we go. Man, that's fast. When the wire's thinner, it heats up quicker. When the wire's thick, it takes a long time to heat it up. So you can see we're in good business here. Our line is right here. We have a little bit going over. So now we want to reinsert this into our plug. Same thing with the battery. We have one side with nothing. The other side has the plus and the minus. So we want to put the red on the plus with the solder facing into the big reservoir area, so you can see how it should only go one way, because if you do this, it doesn't go in. It's not going to work. So you put that in correctly this way. Same thing. This is what you can't see on the other plug, that it's not to the end. So this one is great. You can do exactly the same thing and get that same effect. There's your pop. Turn it over. The battery connector's all the way out there to the end. So now we're going to do this with the negative. And there. Same thing. It's in. So, nice job. So, we'll move on to, we're going to go to this guy. You have this one with the old wires on it. You want to take them off. We're going to do that same method that we did before. Getting your jigs up, finding the hole. Same thing. So you have an old plug and you want to use it, you can actually, you don't have to throw it away. Same exact thing that we were doing earlier. This one's got a little bit thicker wire, so yeah, it's going to be better if we get some solder on here. Get on needle nose pliers ready there. Turn the soldering iron onto the wire. There we go. Then we can get rid of that one and go to the next one. Go this direction here. See, I didn't add any solder. Look how long it takes. I'm still waiting. Here we go. That's why adding that little bit of solder makes a huge difference in heating up the surface that you want. So now these tabs are ready to be reused again for another battery. And since we're not going to use them, we can just put them back in the battery connector till that time. So that's done. So that concludes our how to solder a Traxxas battery connector and to reuse an old connector. Same thing with these new Traxxas connectors. They're exactly the same method. They just have a wider flange. Now I have not done the balancer wires on a LiPo for the Traxxas yet. Because I don't buy Traxxas batteries. Balancing tabs. So that's what these holes are for on the side. It's for the Traxxas brand battery charger, so you don't have to do anything. So anyway, these connectors are exactly the same. So I thank you guys for watching, and until next time, see you later.